Here is a book of prophecy. This is the king. This is the queen. And this is myself with my head cut off.
Anne Boleyn, second wife to Henry VIII, was falsely charged with adultery, incest, and high treason. It was here at the Tower of London where her notorious execution took place. Almost 500 years later, we revisit the site with Natalie Dormer, who plays Anne Boleyn on Showtime's original series The Tudors, and Tom Stammers, Tudors historian, to relive the tragic final days of Anne Boleyn.
So as you may know, Natalie, Anne only came to the Tower twice. The first time, for the eve of her coronation. She stayed in the Tower before she was crowned in Westminster Abbey. To come down to the Tower, she came from Greenwich. The contrast between 1533, when she comes here in triumph, and 1536 couldn't be more stark.
The psychological effect of those 2 hours being exactly the same journey as the previous triumphant coronation voyage. Incredible.
When she discovers that Kingston is going to take her back to the royal lodgings and not to the dungeon, she falls in a heap and weeps.
It's too good for me. Incriminating herself as she goes.
Indeed. So Natalie, I've brought us here to Beauchamp Tower, one of the kind of oldest towers in the fortress, built in the middle of the 13th century. It was in Beauchamp Tower that a lot of prisoners during the Tudor period were kept, and we still get echoes of their inscriptions and their writings on the walls.
This room is covered in graffiti.
If you see the crest here, it's a heraldic shield, which is seen as a sort of symbol of Anne and Anne's kind of, dynastic badge.
The family falcon.
Mounted on the Tudor rosebush. So the idea of this is Anne as queen. It's the union of her family crest, the falcon, with the rosebush, which is the symbol of the dynasty as a whole. So it's a nice symbol of someone who possibly witnessed the execution and does this last desperate gesture as a sign of loyalty and possibly affection for the queen.
So where are we now?
These are rooms that were originally refurbished for the coronation when Anne was crowned in 1533. I brought us here to try and give us a flavour about what Anne's captivity would have been like the final few months of her life, and something about her state of mind.
So she actually stayed in the specific apartments that she stayed in the night before her coronation?
That's the terrible irony, yes. We know quite a lot about Anne's state of mind when she was here because of the records of William Kingston, who was the constable of the Tower at the time, and also because her ladies-in-waiting, which were given to her as a luxury, they function also as spies for Cromwell. And everything that she says, everything that she experiences in terms of her moods is being fed back to him.
You live in close proximity with Her Majesty the Queen. You ever seen her entertain men in her chambers?
2 days before her execution, she has a meeting with Cranmer. It was because of her that he became the Archbishop of Canterbury. And then finally he comes to administer the last rites and kind of hear her final confession.
I confess my innocence before God. I solemnly swear on the damnation of my soul that I have never been unfaithful to my lord and husband.
It's said, by the constable, William Kingston, at the time, that he'd seen many people unravel under such circumstances, but this lady hath much joy and pleasure in death. I mean, execution for her was a means of escape and a means of ending her kind of trial and torment.
So let's talk a little about the delay of the execution. How historically accurate is that?
Undoubtedly accurate. It's said that William Kingston, the constable of the Tower, came to tell her in the morning that the execution was imminent, and of course it was still a further day away.
Master Kingston, I am ready.
My lady, you must forgive me once again. Your execution is put off until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
There's debate about why that happens. It could be that the executioner was delayed in Calais. It could be that Kingston himself didn't yet understand the timetable. At one point she says, will the bishops intercede to save her? She says, will the king relent? She even prophesies that it will never stop raining in London if she is put to death.
So the ravings of
Absolutely.
The emotional duress of the situation.
Of course. I mean, terrible, terrible duress for her. Absolutely. And even morbid humour.
Madam, there will be no pain.
Yes, I heard the executioner was very good. And in any case, I have only a little neck.
Her final mood as she goes to the scaffold is one of composure and resignation, and she behaves with great dignity on that occasion.
Courageous woman.
Indeed. So it's in this area that the scaffold was built for Anne's final execution. Looked absolutely stunning. Decided to wear very bright, deep, kind of crimson petticoats with a grey ermine cloak. Anne was determined to die every inch a queen.
It's wonderful. Michael Hurst in the script more or less sticks to the letter of that speech.
I have come here to die according to the law and thus yield myself to the will of the king, my lord.
So in the final moment, the executioner was worried about the swiftness of her death, and as a result, had concealed the sword under a batch of hay, So Anne didn't realise it was quite so close. He calls for the sword to be brought.
Boy, fetch my sword!
And she turns to look, and as a result, very swiftly, it's pulled out of the hay and the deed is done. It's interesting that Henry himself feels no remorse for what he's done, and the very next day, at Hampton Court, he's becoming betrothed to wife number 3.
Lady Jane.
Your Majesty.
St. Peter's.
Indeed, the Tower of the Chapel. I brought us here to have a look at Anne's final resting place. Obviously, she's beheaded out on Tower Green outside. Shortly after the execution, the body was brought in by her ladies-in-waiting, and then very quickly and very swiftly buried beneath the altar here.
I'm having a bit of a moment here, Tom, because to be able to get this close to Anne, the physical remnants of Anne and her body, is an incredibly moving experience.
And incredibly anonymous. I mean, you have the crest and you have the name, but it's
understated.
It's remarkably understated for a woman of her importance.
That leading light of the Reformation changed so much, the turmoil, social, religious, personal revolution of those decades. And there she is, nondescript.
A footnote to history.
A footnote.